coalitionradio.us, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Let's get right to it. Joining us in studio for the first time is someone that I'm proud to say I've become friends with. She's on the front lines. She's been at every single hearing. She was good enough to grace us in Cumberland. She's been at the hearings in, where were they? Pawtucket and Providence. This is sort of like a bad rock and roll tour. Think Spinal Tap 20 years after Spinal Tap. We're treated to hours and hours of mindless balderdash. But she is a warrior princess, if you will, in the fight against crony corporatism and in the fight against injustice. She is Capri Catanzaro. She is the political director of the Progressive Democrats of Rhode Island. Welcome for the first time to the Coalition.
Thank you for having me.
Great. My takeaway from the first few hearings, I think, is that people have been very, very impressed with, I'll call it, the legislative due diligence of the Progressive Democrats. Now, we make no bones about the fact that you and I probably disagree on some fundamental issues, but I think we can all agree that if we come together on fundamental issues, we can create positive change here in the state and also hold off this type of madness. So tell us about how long you've been a progressive. What was there a seminal event in your life that led you to become a progressive, and just who's doing all this work? Because you guys are reading the rules and you're reading the laws, and again, you're taking no prisoners. But give us a little background.
Well, I've been with the Progressive Democrats since pretty much 2015, and I think, especially with legislation like this, it's very, very easy to pick up the irregularities and the where you see, the Pawtucket owners may say one thing and the media may say one thing, but when you get right down to it and you read the laws, it just says something different. So I think that's really where I come in. I'm very, I want them to tell the truth. I don't want them to just say what they want to say and have it have nothing, no proof of it in the law. And my big thing was 990, which is it's a current Rhode Island general law, and it completely redefines what a redevelopment corporation is, and that's a huge problem for me because this isn't just about the POSOX. This is going to affect everything.
Right.
Every other redevelopment agency, which it turns it into a development agency because it's no longer redeveloping, which would be something like rehabilitating a school, for instance, which is what I would personally like to see money go towards. I'm not okay with rewriting a law only for Pawtucket, but actually opening the door for plenty of other agencies to come in, and it's a type of corruption, actually, the way that it's rewritten.
I guess what's disturbing is, or appalling is a better word, is just how many inconsistencies you've found with what's purported to be in the law and what's actually in the law. The notion that we haven't been handed anything near a final statement or a final piece of legislation yet, despite this being in the works for 3 years, and the pablum that's generated by the PR flax from the POSOX, and its grotesque differences from what is actually been written in the code. I mean, what are some of the things that you stumbled on that have all of a sudden become part of the conversation?
I think, the first thing is right in 990, the current law that defines what a redevelopment agency is. The redevelopment agencies are supposed to be working with blighted areas. It specifically says in the bill, blighted and substandard areas. That's the definition of a redevelopment area. The definition of a redevelopment area is not what the Apex site is. It most certainly is not. And also the rights of a redevelopment agency are not to construct. Actually, I believe it's number 14 in 990. That section, it explicitly states, nothing in this section is meant to construe that the construction of new buildings is permitted. And they actually, they struck all that language. And for me to see that they're not rewriting just this law like for Pawtucket. Once again, like they're rewriting all redevelopment agencies, and it's just it's not consistent with what they're trying to have the public understand, which is that we're only proposing something for Pawtucket. This is something that we need to keep the POSOX here. We want to improve the economic conditions in Pawtucket. No, I think that it's much larger than that, and I think that it's going to, if it passes, which I hope that it doesn't, and I'll do everything I can to prevent that. If it passes, we won't be fighting the Cossacks. We will be fighting so many other, so many more of these. So I say, why not just, if Pawtucket needs help with something, if the Cossacks needs help with something, don't go rewriting general laws. Don't go rewriting what a redevelopment agency is, And so I think that, their rhetoric is so much towards this is a nostalgic, this is important to, our culture, who we are, whether you're a Rhode Island resident or a Pawsox resident. But it's much greater than that, because you can't just have tunnel vision and only look at what you want to happen. You need to look at what are all the consequences of doing this.
Does it bother you? I think this is kind of a T-ball kind of question, but if you hadn't found that, do you believe that would have been disclosed at any time during this process, or would that have simply been sort of slipped into the law until all of a sudden somebody woke up and found it?
Well, I mean, I don't know what they would have found at these hearings. I mean, I'm just one of so many people. I mean, the last hearing, I believe 98 people. That was at the time that they mentioned how many people had signed up to testify. It was 98. And it went pretty late too. So of all those people, I can't say that somebody else wouldn't have found it. I would hope that somebody else would have read it and found it. I read it quite early, I suppose, but somebody else I think would have found that, because it's so obvious. Once you read the law, it's striking. I mean, it's underlined, it's in bold. You can't miss these adjustments. They're meant to be noticed. So all I did was notice that they were changing something.
But it would have been more appropriate for the legislators involved, and I won't name names, but in general, the legislators involved, to proactively have advertised this. So, and you're absolutely right. I can't underemphasize how important that one seemingly subtle, to folks who aren't paying attention, change is to changing the way we do everything in terms of economic development in the state. And this is already a state. Right. This is already a state that gives away too much to wealthy developers. This is a state that already is far too steeped in cronyism for its own good.
Well, it definitely, taking out the need for the area to be blighted, allowing the construction to happen on that area, that definitely leads, I mentioned in my Senate testimony at the State House originally, that yes, it leads to cronyism, it leads to corruption, because you're able to then bribe a legislator, or even in the city council, because the city council must approve these redevelopment areas. If you have enough money, you can do whatever you want. And in the Constitution, in the Rhode Island State Constitution, it actually it says that an area must be, the redevelopment powers, it must be a blighted and substandard area. I mean, having it written in the Constitution, you can't just legislate this out.
Right.
You just can't. You need to have a constitutional convention.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I would say not necessarily that the legislators should just come at it from one side of, oh, well, we shouldn't do this, but it should also say, we can't do this.
Right.
We actually, it's unconstitutional. And so that's an issue that I really want more people to talk about, because a lot of, they'll go up there and they'll explain, I really care about the Cossacks, I want them to stay here. And all I can say is, well, the Constitution was written a certain way.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I want the Cossacks to go. I mean, I don't want them to leave. I'm not. But, I mean, the Constitution is the Constitution. You can't change that without a convention. You can't change that with some Senate hearings.
No, and there's a reason why you have code, and there's a reason why you have a Constitution.
I think it was put in there, and it was very important that it was put in there.
Right. No, and as is the notion that we must vote on government-backed bonding.
That's also a really important issue. And I think that the requirement that we must have voter approval on, I believe it's over $50,000. That requirement in tandem with the requirement of a redevelopment area, or for it to be a blighted or substandard area, those things go hand in hand. And the reason why is because you do not need to vote on these redevelopment funds. Mm-hmm. That's why there's going through the legislature right now.
Right.
So because we don't have to vote on them, well, we have a lot of protections to make sure that this cronyism and this corruption doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So I think that they do go hand in hand. And if this were a redevelopment project where we're actually redeveloping a blighted area and not constructing a new stadium, for instance, I don't think that that's something we would need to like vote on as a population. But because we took out those requirements, I don't see how this doesn't fall under that category of, we're using like state dollars and we're putting the taxpayer on the line. I know the phrase moral obligation bond has been debunked and then still repeatedly used. I think it has more of a symbolic meaning than a literal meaning, because when you get into the technicalities of it, things are shady, but at the end of the day, we took out these words that were added to the Constitution for a reason. And I think now we're looking at two different sections of the Constitution that we need to take seriously. We can't just say, well, how do we skirt around this? That wasn't the point. The point of the Constitution isn't to just put up little barriers for you to like drive around. It's to actually put up safety barriers and to set up, I guess, what we'd like to stand by, So I think we'd like to stand by the voters actually being able to trust that their legislature, that the legislature will not be, just giving away state monies to whoever may bribe them the most, or et cetera. And I mean, I'm not saying the Paw Sox have bribed anybody right now, but it's just opening the door to it. So. I think that the legislators should really look at the consequences of doing this, not just the good the good things that the Paw Sox get to stay. We have a ballpark. There's a lot of positive things to look at, especially the jobs that it would create. But if you're not doing it the right way, if you're really trying your best to get around the Constitution, I don't think that's the right way to do it. Regardless of if it would be an economically positive project or a project that would benefit the community in general. The Constitution is really the most important thing we need to look at. That's number one, and we shouldn't try to go around these hurdles that were put there on purpose to protect the taxpayer. Right,
and the reason why we have, I believe it's a 10-year interval for constitutional conventions, and why you have to vote to have a constitutional convention, is to purposely make it difficult to walk away from a constitution that is a combination of a statement of principles, a statement of behaviors, a statement of standards, and really speaks to our core values as a state. It's not supposed to be easy. In the past, it's interesting because it gives both support and credence, but at the same time challenges the notion of whether or not to have a constitutional convention, because clearly the fear is if you have a constitutional convention, the powers that be next time will look to change these things to make it easier, for them to rationalize away a cronyist, I'll call it at least a morally corrupt investment on behalf of the state, even if it's not legally corrupt.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about a constitutional convention at this point.
Right.
So I don't want to say that they would definitely try to change things like this specific law, because I don't know what they would do. At the end of the day, this isn't the legislators are not necessarily trying to actively create this create this environment of whoever wants to, completely develop an area and use eminent domain to acquire that land, come on in. That's not their goal. I mean, I do believe that the legislators do want to actually create a stadium for the Paw Sox and create some economic, as they say, like they're creating more economic activity and they want to have this stimulus. I do believe that would be the original reason for this, but when you completely rewrite this law this way, it does make you wonder, did you think about the consequences? I mean, who really drafted this legislation after all? I think that the Paw Sox, like you said, it's been about 3 years that they've been trying to get something like this through, and it seems like something that's more messy than purposeful, I guess.
Right.
Just how do we get this done? How do we make this legal? How do we make this happen? And just crossing out a few lines in this law. Well, here we go. This is our new plan. But I don't think anybody looked at the Rhode Island Constitution when they did that.
Right. Are you concerned at all with that, with the seemingly total absence of any independent economist or any independent financial analysis of this, as I am?
Well, I definitely am somewhat skeptical about whether or not it will actually have any benefit economically, if it will really be viable. One of the issues is at the last Senate hearing in Pawtucket, there was Randall Rose mentioned that actually there is an expert that was explaining how much it will probably cost in the end, and he was mentioning over $100 million. I mean, we're quoted for 23 or 38 or even
Right.
71, and this is going to be over 100 million most likely. And one of the problems is that the financing lease that we're actually getting into, or that the proposal 989 would get us into. One of the requirements of a financing lease is that, the governor explains that this is an essential public facility. Last time I checked, a ballpark was not an essential public facility. And another thing, and the governor would have to submit Gina Raimondo, for instance, would have to submit it is essential and it's very necessary right now, and also have a complete the maximum possible obligation of the state. That would also need to be included there. And within the bill, 989, it doesn't mention, it says, excluding the debt service fees and all of these other things. It says excluding interest. So we actually don't know the real number. It's not within the resolution, 989.
Right.
So, I mean, there are multiple ways that this really, it's not, you're not following all your paperwork in a sense. We're not we're not following all the rules here.
Well, and I'll draw a parallel from something completely different, but seemingly it was brought to my attention, even one of the same word tracks in the same process, and that, of course, is the Invenergy Power Plant. There's a very well-defined, extremely articulated step process to follow when you're permitting a power plant like that. And yet, time and time again, the board that is empowered by state government to analyze that seems to be willing to ignore some really fundamental gaps in information being provided by the people pushing for it. In this case, the folks at Invenergy. The process seems intent on moving forward, regardless of their failure to substantiate anything from the legitimate way to get water for it, or disaster recovery plans, or any of the minutia that you and I would have to fill in if we were looking to do just about anything in this state. I always point out in this state that you can't get a koi pond built in this state without overwhelming degree of analysis. Yet you've got two organizations here, one of them Invenergy, the other one the Pawtucket Red Sox, that seem to not have to be worried by the details, do they?
Yes, I think that I looking at what's happened with Invenergy, I do not know all of the details, but I do, as I understand, there have been significant issues with the paperwork that they have filed.
Right.
They're not giving all of the information, they're not filling things out correctly,
Right.
And I think that you can draw a parallel to what's happening with the Paw Sox here, because this bill, it seems that they were rushing to get it through this session. And they missed these really they're detrimental if they go through, but it seems like they missed these things. So I'm not trying to blame anybody, make them feel bad, but I just think that this is what the hearing process is for, because we're supposed to see whether or not what are the other consequences of this bill. I mean, every time they might look at a progressive or liberal proposal, okay, well this sounds good here, but what are the consequences? And you should do that with every proposal. So I think that that's the purpose of this, and I think that now that I mentioned it at a few hearings, I will mention it at the future ones. Obviously, we're mentioning it here. It's getting out in the public sphere. And so that's the purpose. I'm glad that it's happened here like this, and I think that they will realize how important it is to change it now.
Right.
And I think as long as they change it, and maybe we can get a good deal with them, maybe it will, if it's a good deal, it's a good deal. I just don't think it's a good deal like this one currently, and I just don't think it's constitutional. So I'm glad that the hearings are able to, I'm able to voice that opinion there, and it's not even an opinion, it's a fact. But.
Right. Well, and to your point, and by the way, the three words, and if any folks from Borough are listening right now, they'll put down any hot beverages you have, do not operate heavy equipment, step away from the remote, and any item that you might turn into a projectile. But I think the three words were respect the process. Today we were treated to the Senate President, Speaker Mattiello, the governor, all being quoted that as if they were on talking points, that, we have the process to go through, and to that, of course, I say balderdash, because we were supposed to have addressed these issues before we went to this process, which, in my mind, I want your reaction to this, what we should be listening to right now is a thoroughly vetted piece of legislation that is buttressed by a significant amount of economic research, so that folks in the community can sit back, listen, and then pose questions based on a complete set of data and analysis. And I think it's fair to say that we don't have anything even remotely approaching that. And this is, in my opinion, has turned into nothing more than a hearts and minds, heartstrings tour of just how much the POSOCs mean to a very select group of people. Have you seen anything substantial come out from these people in the form of economic analysis? If this were a federal government, we would have to scorecard this. We would have to come out with a CBO assessment of exactly what the economic impact is. Have you seen any of that?
Well, like I said, I mean, I've heard that from numerous people that have mentioned and inquired from this. The information is not necessarily the easiest to acquire, but what I've heard, and it was in the testimony, that it could be over, or most likely is about, over $100 million at the end,
right.
$130 million. And that's not explicitly in the bill. That's a huge problem. And all of the reports, all of the presentations that they do, they'll have a lot of PowerPoints where they have just a few points, a lot of pictures, and when they start speaking about this plan, there's a very it's lacking in the actual numbers. They may throw in some things such as we've paved this many roads, and this is our rainy day fund now, for instance, in Pawtucket. But I have not seen that this will 100% give earn a lot of money, a lot of revenue, and in turn benefit Rhode Island. A lot of them, it's all of these projections that I don't necessarily agree with. Some of them, there is some kind of double scoring. There's stuff about ancillary development. So I'm not really sure that the studies that they've come out with and the results that they've given, I'm not really sure that they're entirely accurate. So I do invite, plenty more people to look at this and say, okay, let's look at this objectively. How many across the country? What does building a minor league stadium like this? What happens? Does it increase development by this percentage? By this percentage? What about the revenues? What about the what about the property taxes in the surrounding area? What about the jobs? I mean, do the jobs, are they all minimum wage? Are they in between? Is there a range of incomes? Right. What's the industry like? What field are they in? Are they all just food workers that are working in the various So these kind of studies, I think that a lot of it has been spoken during these presentations, especially like the ones at the State House and in Pawtucket. But I don't think that it's been outlined in a way that you can really critique it as a scholar would.
Right.
So I think that's a problem. I think that that's part of this hearing process too, that they're going to say, we're bringing up all of these issues. Well, do you have solutions to them? Can you give us answers? And so I think that the faster they give us those answers, the faster we can come to a conclusion, and maybe the more efficient these hearings will be, because we will not be repeating the same issues over and over.
And this is my concern. You're going to find this interesting coming from a libertarian. Are we engaging in? What's the best way to call this? Are we about to engage in, if it's successful like they claim it's going to be, government-sponsored gentrification? My question has always been, with regard to development, when the government is involved, is who are we developing for? Are we developing for the people who live in that community already, or are we developing for a selective subset of folks who are going to come in who have no ties to the community? Now, as a libertarian, if that happens in a free market manner, where folks using, again, their own risk capital, I know progressives probably have an issue with this. I have less of an issue with it because it's organic and somewhat naturally occurring. But on the other hand, if we as a government are erecting tax incentives and to encourage people to come in and gentrify our neighborhoods, who are we serving?
The bill actually, it effectively, and please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody's corrected me, it exempts them from taxes for 30 years. Because When I said this, it was almost in response to the fact that I've heard from numerous sources and publications, etc. Well, they generate $1.9 million of revenue a year. We don't want that to leave. So this is in an effort to maintain this revenue and hopefully increase it. So the state taxes, we can't lose 1.9 million. But if we keep them and with this deal, we will be losing that 1.9. The reason being because instead of it going towards our general fund, for instance, it's actually going towards the repayments.
Right.
So no matter what, we're not really
Exactly.
receiving this 1.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, there's no argument here for the economic, besides the construction costs. Without the plenty of union people have been, they're very supportive of this because it's their jobs. I mean, I understand. If it was my job, I'd probably be really, let me have a job. Don't stop this business from hiring me. But at the same time, if they're not economically, if there's not really an economic reason to do this, then there really isn't a reason to put our money into it.
Right.
If it's not like an essential public facility, like I mentioned earlier, an essential public facility would be any of our crumbling schools. Pick one, I don't care.
It's a target-rich environment. There's plenty of
Yes,
them.
and when you're looking at these proposals, I think that, not that this isn't a proposal that should be heard. Sure, it can be heard. But when we're really looking at what's going on in the state, I don't think that it could ever be a priority. I don't see it. All the testimony virtually all of the testimony from the actual, supporters, like just the residents or the ones, the fans that go to the games, they all mention these very social, cultural reasons for wanting to keep the Paw Sox. And I completely agree. Like, yes, the Paw Sox, they do belong in Pawtucket. They're called the Pawtucket Red Sox.
Right.
I agree with that. But we're not talking about whether or not we want to, paint something, with the Paw Sox label. We're talking about millions of dollars here. And we're talking about not allowing the voters to have that choice.
Right.
So,
And the notion of that it's revenue neutral, I believe, is blatantly fraudulent. To your point, the money is not going into any sort of taxpayer
well, it's
fund.
being diverted and it's being used to pay back.
Which is the same thing that happened
So we're
to Providence.
losing $1.9 million from
Right.
them, but we're also
We're
paying.
gaining a stadium somehow.
Well, they're not really putting forward anything more besides that initial $12 million. So it seems to me that they're getting a stadium for about $12 million.
Pretty good deal.
And not that they and it's not necessarily that they're owning it. Yeah, I understand that we will own it, and many.
But are we in the business? And to your point, if the state of Rhode Island, quote unquote, or the city of Pawtucket, owns a stadium while their schools are crumbling,
Yes.
that's a problem. You see, because let's talk to the civic pride issue.
If the schools are falling apart, the stadium's going to fall apart. That's just how. Unless the Paw Sox are going to claim that they will take, they will be responsible for all the maintenance.
In writing.
And I mean all of them.
Yeah.
Like all of the things. I mean that's not just every 5 years they go through and say, well, maybe we can fix a pipe here or there. I mean this is really. I mean they're complaining about the roof caving in. To which I would say, well, why don't you talk to Providence school children and see what's happening to their roofs because they're caving in too.
Right.
But yes, I mean if we're owning the stadium. How are we going to maintain it if we can't even maintain our current public schools?
No, you're absolutely right. And the other, I'll call it and these are my words, not my guess, but the big lie is that if the Pawtucket Red Sox go away, somehow that $1.9 million in revenue goes away. And I guess, it's interesting because the head of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, the mayor of Cumberland, purport not to understand this concept, but the money will be spent elsewhere. It will be spent on local businesses with the added benefit of not having to be directed towards the repayment of some facility. If instead of going to a Paw Sox game where you're $4 in taxes or $8 in taxes, or if you go to the big dinner, $50 in taxes goes towards repayment of the stadium. If in fact you go to any one of the number of fine restaurants in downtown Central Falls, Pawtucket, or now Cumberland, that money will actually go towards helping rebuild schools or any one of the things that you would like to think. I mean, as a libertarian, We're not going to go down this path, I promise. As a libertarian, I sincerely believe that taxation is theft. But, if in fact I'm going to have to pay taxes towards some level of government, whether it be the most basic functions of government, I want it to go to that.
Such as an essential public facility,
Right.
like a school.
Absolutely. So you have these series of big lies that, under the Ronald Reagan definition of the big lie, is if you repeat something often enough, it becomes the truth. And if you repeat it passionately at 10 o'clock at night as you're the 55th Paw Sox employee up there to pretend that they're citizens of Pawtucket. I mean, the other night we were treated to one woman, lovely woman, very impassioned speech, and she about the Pawtucket Red Sox role in Pawtucket, and she opened up the speech with, as we travel from southeastern Massachusetts where we live. Okay. Tell you what, why don't you have anyone in Fawn's Corner or Dartmouth or anything kick in part of their taxes to support the people of Pawtucket? Here, and I love your reaction to this because, libertarians aren't supposed to be emotional, but I'm emotional. There's this truth being claimed that by denying them their stadium, that we are creating an incalculable harm to the civic pride of Pawtucket, that the civic pride of Pawtucket revolves around a stadium. It's my contention that as a working parent, as someone who's very, very middle class, sadly, sometimes not so middle class, sometimes a little lower, that the people of Pawtucket would take greater pride in schools that aren't crumbling, in keeping their fire departments open, in having small businesses fill up all the empty malls on Newport Avenue.
I think that's exactly the thing to mention. I think Rhode Island, our small business climate, I have never ever heard a single bill or a proposal be brought forth to the legislature and not have somebody say, well, what about business? How will this affect business?
Mm-hmm.
And they always are concerned with promoting and fostering a better business climate. And I think that fostering a better business climate, especially like the small businesses, are the ones that they really they could be like the benchmark. They can really grow to be very important in the state. And so if we're going to be using money for any type of business, once again, there's a priority here. The priority is not to keep millionaires in their business. It's to allow smaller businesses and maybe new entrepreneurs or even businesses that are currently small to medium sized but they might need some assistance. That's where our money should be going if we're trying to economically develop Rhode Island, make it more economically incentivize, I guess, Rhode Island as a business with a good business climate. It's not a stadium. It's not something like that. And even one of the things that we use for our tourism campaign are beaches. That is, for instance, like a public facility. It's
Right. That
contributes very much to our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no corporations are involved. Plenty of businesses in the surrounding areas of all of our beaches, they thrive because we have this really, really great essential public facility, as I would call it. It's a park. It's free for anybody. The parking is an issue constitutionally, but that's something that works. We have a beach. We don't have a stadium, and suddenly we have all of this influx. I mean, when the stadium was first built, and in the meantime, how much is really contributed versus how much we have contributed to it as a
Right.
state.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's really comparable. I don't think that it's what we should be using as a benchmark of this is what we should strive for. I think we should go further than that. I think small businesses is a way to really, if we're going to invest somewhere, like you said, you don't want your, taxation is theft, as you say. If that's true, then you do want it to go to the most efficient and effective area.
I want businesses. What I find nauseating, and I use that word intentionally, is the notion that you'll have small businesses in Cumberland, Pawtucket, and Central Falls who will not gain. First of all, anyone who's ever worked next to a stadium, and I have, understands that on days where there are events in that stadium, every business within a square mile
they lose all their business.
is shut down.
Yeah.
There's no, you might have one or two bars pick
Well,
up.
that's how a monopoly or a large corporation works.
Right.
If you are able to somehow fulfill all of the needs of a population. I mean, an example could be something like Walmart or Amazon. You know, they can fulfill so many needs that most people will go to them for almost everything, even if it's not the best place to get all of their stuff. It's easiest.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in the stadium and you're thinking, well, I might be hungry, I might want a beer, I'm thirsty, whatever, you will not go outside of the stadium to go and go to a brand new restaurant that somebody that just graduated from Johnson & Wales just started. You're not going to do that because the stadium was it's built so that you stay, you're contained.
Exactly.
It's meant to stifle. Well, it's not meant to stifle. It's just a result of having. An actual vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I know many people say, if it's such a great deal, just put it to the vote. It should pass overwhelmingly. Now, that's a little bit of a sarcastic remark to make because we all know that this probably will not pass. And I think that's the biggest thing. I want to know, are the legislators entertaining this because they really do want to hear what everybody has to say? Are they understanding that a lot of people really do not want it? I understand that many people want the Paw Sox here, but this isn't about whether or not we want the Paw Sox here. It's about where do we want Rhode Island's economic climate to go? Where do we want our actual moral compass of the state? Do we listen to our Constitution or not? Those are the bigger questions that I think we should be asking. And as passionate as the construction workers are, even though the supporters of the Paw Sox are, I'm a very passionate person too. I mean, you can tell because I'm, at the Paw Sox hearings, saying exactly what I'm feeling and, saying the exact facts of the bill. So I can very much empathize with those activists that are, trying to do the best thing for their community. And all I can say is, this isn't just, if this was only about the city of Pawtucket spending money on this, then yeah, your voice would be number one. But at the end of the day, this is like Rhode Island. This is everybody's money. This isn't just about Paw Sox fans. And it's about, what do we want Rhode Island, what direction do we want Rhode Island to go in? Clearly our business climate, we do need to do something about it. I think everybody is in agreement about that. So if we're going to take a really big step, which I believe this is a very big step, I mean, it's $83 million, probably over $100 million, close to $150 million at the end of it. At the end of the day, this isn't where we should be going with it. There are plenty of more ideas that are better, that are more effective, and are more. It shows that we value small business owners, entrepreneurs, as you might say, people that put their own risk in, and those are the type of people that I think Rhode Islanders, regardless of their political affiliation, they value people that are passionate and that they will work for their own success. So if we're going to continuously stifle that, not purposefully, but as a result of funding large projects like the Paw Sox, which, as we've spoken about, stifles the surrounding businesses. We're giving a handout to a large corporation simply for being wealthy and able to do this project. We're not saying, oh well, we realize there's this family that they put themselves through school. Maybe it's a couple. They started a small business here, and it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of risk. Thousands of dollars went into it, and every day, or like every month, say they're hoping that they can just make a little more money or just break even. That takes a lot of effort and hard work, and that should be what we're rewarding.
Right. Excellent. Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted you to come in tonight, because I think you spoke very eloquently to a number of Rhode Islanders from a number of different backgrounds. I couldn't agree with you more on these issues.
There's a lot of turnover between virtually every party. The fact that the Democrats and the Republicans are completely different is definitely it's meant to divide further. Libertarians are marginalized significantly, but just like the progressives, I'm considered to be a radical. Just I don't know what I'm talking about. Nobody can really agree with my positions, but I mean, there's about I don't know how many, but there were plenty of people at those POSOX hearings that felt the same way that I do. I mean, you feel the same way that I do. So
right. Well,
we just need to capitalize on those issues, like you were saying, and have more of a movement together instead of just letting these party lines or these ideological lines divide us on every issue.
Well, and I think a lot of that has been done by the political elite. Now, I'll sound like the radical here, but the political elite seeks to divide us, and they seek to marginalize us, and they seek to label us, when in fact the type of conversation you and I are having is fairly commonsensical, much more so than the madness that these folks have perpetrated upon on us as a body politic. And when you factor in the generational failure at nearly every level, how did our schools get to this point? Well, it wasn't because progressives and libertarians are running things. How did our economy get to this point? Well, it wasn't because of anything you and I did. And what we're actually proposing is actual fact-based solutions to pressing problems that have been created by the very people who would divide us based on party lines. Like I said, if there's any positive that's come out of that, is the notion that we've stepped aside from that and we continually focus on solutions, because I'm not willing to accept anything really they say anymore, because it's just simply not working.
I think more towards the side of, instead of looking towards the disagreements, I suppose.
Right.
When speaking about parties, generally the most hot topic, the most dividing issues are the first ones that are mentioned. Nobody comes into a discussion and says something that they think that everyone's going to agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they make a distinction between what a Democrat is, what a Republican is. And that's where this wall, whether it be like subconscious or conscious, consciously we're putting up this wall, and it makes us, I guess, more skeptical about, well, if a Republican, as a Democrat, if a Republican puts forward a piece of legislation or says something, well, maybe I will be more skeptical of what, if that is true or if it's accurate, or and the same thing vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea is something that isn't pushing forward positive change. It's just creating more, like in Congress, more gridlock, more butting heads, more winner takes all instead of real compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Compromise within a party to form a strong bloc, rather than compromise across the aisle with individuals.
Right.
So I think that regardless of who is at fault here, the parties do need to get away from the idea that they are stronger as a bloc.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, it's true that they can block things and they can then push things forward as a bloc. Is that really benefiting the entire state now? And what happens when you butt heads now?
Right. There's no relationships there. There's no shared goals, no commonality.
It should be the best thing that's for Rhode Island, and I understand. It's not that I'm not naive to think that they, that all politicians will always be perfect, obviously. But I think that now, instead of being what's the best policy, it's been significantly derailed into how am I supposed to react to this based on my party affiliation. If we can just, yes, you use your party for a lot of things when you don't know which way to go. Sure, that's fine. But we should really just get away from the fact that, or the idea that if your party has views on a certain issue this way, that everyone from that party must have that same view, and they all must be a homogenous group. And then with that block, they must then, let's talk to the Republicans, for instance, and they're a homogenous block. not to.
Yeah.
You'll never get any kind of compromise that will make anybody happy. I think that's what we see in Congress very much right now. In the state of Rhode Island, we have a much different political climate, but the ideologies of and the idea of I'm very partisan, those still hold true.
Mm-hmm.
So while our General Assembly is, a supermajority of Democrats, and we have in the governor and the General Assembly, they're all Democrats. We still do have this issue that the Democrats, they hold too strongly to this partisan idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the majority unaffiliated in Rhode Island, I don't think that they want this. I think that it's actually should be maybe a symbol that working with others, regardless of their affiliation, that's what we want to see as Rhode Islanders. It's not that we want to see a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, or we just want to see things work together, see people work together.
No, it's a greater goal, and quite frankly, and this is the first time you visited us, but we call it the coalition because ultimately what we do here is we bring together people.
I do appreciate that name.
No, it's people of goodwill, smart people of goodwill that come together to find commonality and to find solutions to the pressing problems Rhode Islanders face here locally and also on a national basis. There's a great deal of conversation to be had. And again, I want to thank the Paw Sox for helping simulate it.
There's plenty of activism going on with this, and I'm glad that I'm glad that people are able to come together like this, because just like in the speaker's district, there's been some canvassing. Obviously the hearings are going on,
Mm-hmm.
and so many people are mobilizing for that. I think that the more involved you are in your your government, state
Mm-hmm.
government, local government, you become better informed, and you understand what's happening more. I mean, I may have read that Bill 990. I may have read that and identified numerous issues with it, but I didn't. It's not the first time I've read a bill. Most definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
I've read plenty of bills, so I have the skill, and I'm able to actually use it
Mm-hmm.
and understand. And every time I read one bill, I get more. I build that skill. I get
Right.
more practice with that. And so the more we involve the general public, the general electorate, and get them to understand these issues, well, the next issue they'll have a much clearer understanding of. I think that the more we get people like the construction workers and the supporters of the Paw Sox Stadium, all the fans, I'm glad they're getting involved. Yes, they're opposing they have opposing views as I do, but I'm glad that they're there because I think that they're learning a lot. I mean, I can see their faces when I may say something or when somebody else may say something that just opens the door to, oh, look what the bill says. Look what it says. They all look at each other like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Privately, more than a few of them have come to me and say, why do you feel so strongly about this? Why do you feel so strongly about that? And again,
they're educated.
Well, it's interesting because there's a gentleman named Larry Sharp, who's a prominent libertarian, who points out very aptly that the goal of every conversation should not be to win the argument. The goal should be to...
That's called a debate.
Right. You present your point in a friendly, on-point, articulate manner, and hopefully what you're doing is you're providing people, you're planting a seed, you're planting food for thought. And if you walk away having done that, then everyone is better for it. If you walk away, bombing the person, trolling the person, and you end up blocking each other, we've accomplished nothing. But in the minute or so we've got left, first of all, how can folks get a hold of you? How can folks find out more about the Progressive Democratic movement here in the state? I know you guys have been very aggressive and very successful in fielding candidates. So if folks feel like they want to explore the progressive movement in the state, how can they do so?
Definitely, the Progressive Dems are, we want as many candidates as possible. I think that no matter what, especially the fact that we are such a Democratic state, a lot of the Democrats never see primaries, or they end up, the only primary they see is the one that they lose, and
Right.
that's it. The more candidates, the better, really. If you are interested in running as an independent, that's your choice. You can do that, but getting into the Democratic primary process, that's what I'm interested in, because I think we do have some good legislators up there. I think that it's always a good idea, no matter what side it is, whether it's the Republicans, the Democrats, the Libertarians, the Greens, any party. If you do not have any competition, then I think that it breeds this not really the best type of mindset for those legislators. So I would say if you're interested in running for office, especially in the Democratic primary, like the RIPDA, we would love to see more of those people. Our office is on 118 Gano Street. We have meetings, usually it's like the third Monday of every month, and that's usually a general meeting. We send out an email about that, but we have a website. It's riprogressivedems.com, and we also have a Twitter account, riprogdems. So definitely following us on Twitter, and we have a Facebook page as well. I believe it's still riprogdems.
Yep.
You can follow a little bit more of what we do, what our members are like, and hopefully if there's an issue that you have a question with, I would love to talk to people about issues and get to know where they stand.
Right.
As the political director, it's important that it's not my specific agenda, it's the people's agenda. And so yeah, definitely using our Twitter, Facebook, and our website platforms would be a great way to get in contact with us, especially if you're interested in organizing for the against the PASOX and trying to canvass or do hearings, anything like that. We're trying to mobilize people. The more people that can go out and say exactly what they feel about the PASOX, the better. And then hopefully, if they're interested in running for office, this is also a great way to get to know a little bit more what the landscape is in Rhode Island politically.
Super. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Capri Catanzaro, she is the Policy and Political Director of your Rhode Island Progressive Democratic Party. She has been instrumental in mobilizing and articulating a clear vision that is facts-based, in fighting, my words, this sort of the scourge of corporate cronyism here in the state of Rhode Island. She is someone, as we like to say, hashtag takes it very, very personally. I hope you'll come back often. The door is open. Issues that come up, the point of the conversation here at the Coalition is to bring, as we said just a moment ago, people of goodwill who have clear vision, who are passionate, and who give a damn. And you certainly represent that very well. Thank you.